Ubisoft. They're one of the biggest games companies in the industry and have led the way in both multiplayer and single player games. In my childhood, everyone was super excited for the next Assassin's Creed or Watchdogs game. So, what changed? Hello and welcome to the Echoverse Unlimited Show. This week we'll be covering why I believe Ubisoft has gone from one of the greats to now one of the worst in the industry. And in the process, probably get myself blacklisted from every Ubisoft event in the future. I will be doing this on a franchise by franchise basis to try and get to the root of what happened to this once beloved company. So, with that, shall we begin? So, let's start our analysis of where Ubisoft went wrong with one of its biggest franchises, Far Cry. This franchise is very personal to me because I've been playing the game since I was a kid. This franchise mixes Michael Bay style action, or Just Cause is a good similar franchise to go with a great villain and usually an engaging story. The villains are the staple of the series, with many of them, including Vass and Pagan Min from Far Cry 3 and 4, being hailed as some of the best villains ever put to screen. The characters exude personality and can be quite scary when they're not delivering great heroic speeches about how they're right to the protagonist, of which with Pagan Min, if you sit through the conversation with him long enough, you get to live. And that's how it ends, which I think is quite entertaining. It's just a really interesting world, the Far Cry universe, and Ubisoft developed that every game, especially with these two installments, Far Cry 3 and 4. The story and games were well received by the fans of the franchise and also the critics. And I personally really thought the co-op with Far Cry 4, with the second player playing as Herc, was a great addition to the series, and I'm glad that they've continued that into the later games. Then we go on to Far Cry Primal, which was a mess. It removed the fast-paced Michael Bay style combat and cars, chases, and all of that good stuff with bows, arrows, and clubs. It just didn't feel like Far Cry. The villains were forgettable. I don't even know who they are. The gameplay was boring, and the story was mundane. It was probably my least favorite Far Cry game to ever release. The only redeemable quality was the animals that you could find around the world and get roam it with you. I thought that added a little bit of character to the game, and that was its unique spin, I guess. But with a separate IP, this could have worked, but it just wasn't a Far Cry game. Next, they released Far Cry 5, which is my personal favourite of the Far Cries, but it was also highly controversial. The villain, the father, I thought was the best villain to date, which again is a very highly controversial statement. Put in the comments if you agree or disagree with me. But what I liked was that the three side villains as well, Joseph's siblings, were also strong enough to hold up their own individual sections of the game, and you felt really immersed in the story because of it. You really didn't like the any of the members of the family, as you're not supposed to, and I just found the story really interesting. However, some people argue that the game was getting way too political with their treatment of certain characters.
An ice wall would be just the thing to keep the maple leaf menaces out of our country.
However, I love the innovations. Guns for Hire was great, characters were likable and memorable. And to be honest, I think this was where Far Cry was at its best. Next, we go on to New Dawn, returning to the chaotic gameplay that fans know and love. Setting it in a nuclear apocalypse, I think, was a great move from Ubisoft. It really allows for the craziness and fun that the Far Cry franchise is known for to take center stage, and the story was still pretty engaging. The villains were a little bit weaker, Mickey and Lou. They weren't as strong as the father by any stretch. However, he was in the game and really helped to hold up the villainous side of the game, and I'm glad that he was quite a prominent part of it. Otherwise, I feel like it could have been a little bit more lackluster. The makeshift weapons were really cool. I love the outposts and the rewards for that, and the how you can go up in difficulty. It was the right amount of grinding if you wanted to do it, and it was completely optional. I personally did all of them because I found them fun, and when I was playing in co-op, I just thought that was a really good addition. I played through that with Nathan. Actually, I was going to say Charlie, but no, I played through that with Nathan. Um, so yeah, I was pretty impressed with this. They also added base building, which is a feature that I really enjoyed. Seeing everyone, all of your specialists and your guns for hire just walking around the base was just really cool. So yeah, this one also gets a tick. Then last year, Far Cry 6 released, and it had a real opportunity. 2021 was destitute of good games. We were craving for a good Far Cry experience, and they did not deliver. It was the worst Far Cry to release since Primal, in my opinion. The open world felt lifeless. They removed so many of the key features that Far Cry 5 and New Dawn had in favor of others that just didn't make sense. No skills. Why? Excessive grinding. Why? No character customization. Boring villains. Minus Anton, I have to give Giancarlo Espinosa credit. He was really good as Anton. So they keep up with the villains, but he still didn't hold a candle to some of the others due to the writing, I think. And no Herc for some reason. For the first time, I think I saw Ubisoft saying they wanted their players to feel a fresh story. But Herc isn't a key plot point of any of the other stories, so you could have done that quite easily if you wanted to. So that was disappointing. And it just was a real letdown for me, especially because I was so excited and looking forward to this game all year. With the removal of guns for hire and replace them with some admittedly cool animals, I haven't finished it, and I don't think I will. Ubisoft, what did you do? Why? So, what went wrong? Primal tried to innovate too much and took everything that fans loved about Far Cry and removed it. Whereas Far Cry 6 didn't innovate at all and also removed key features that fans of the franchise had grown to love. I don't understand what was going through their head, so I feel like we need to look at another franchise for help with this. So, it's time to turn to the Creed. Next is the lifeblood of Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed. In recent years, it would be hard to find a year where an Assassin's Creed hasn't graced us with its presence. It's Ubisoft's yearly offering that keeps getting worse. In this franchise, I'll be looking specifically at Revelations, Black Flag, Origins, and Valhalla, because I believe these are the games that I have the most authenticity comparing, because they're the ones I've played the most. So I think it makes sense for us to start with the earliest one, Revelations. This was my first Assassin's Creed, and so holds a lot of nostalgia in my heart. You play as Ezio Auditore on his adventure, and you come to the conclusion of his trilogy. It's a very interesting story, filled with very personal details. Ubisoft's ability to mix real life and real world characters throughout history and fantasy is something that they excel at again here. The gameplay is fun. You feel like an assassin as you sneak around, killing Templars, assassinating targets, and hoping to do it all while being unseen. Which, let's be honest, never goes as planned. It's just really entertaining and is the staple of what an Assassin's game should be like. And I gotta point out, the synchronization points is just awesome. Just seeing that eagle or bird fly around as you stand on the edge of a large, high up, well, no, it's not large actually, it's usually quite a small platform, and then you jump into a hay bale or something. I love it. So yeah, Ubisoft, keep going. Maybe a bit more innovation is what's needed, and a lot of fans called for that at the time. So let's see what they do next. Black Flag. Ubisoft listened. Assassin's Creed Black Flag is a fan favorite and one of the games in the series that are most well loved. It's a pirate's life for you as Edward Conway in this ambitious and endearing game as you sail the seven seas searching for treasure, instead of the moralistic sort of motivations that Ezio and the other assassins had. You are doing this purely for gold, which I think is a much more accurate way to portray a pirate assassin. I think it was a great idea. It goes away with the classic Assassin's Creed formula and reinvents itself uh, in what it means to be an assassin, whilst keeping that key point: you are still an assassin. I was thoroughly impressed. I love playing this game and just exploring what at the time was a graphically amazing and beautiful world that felt alive. Wow, Ubisoft making meaningful and fun adaptations to a franchise? Can you keep it up? No, no, they can't. Now, Origins, my least favorite Assassin's Creed game to date. It's perfectly good, just not an Assassin's Creed game. It's got forgettable characters, an obscene amount of grinding, and a lifeless open world. You are still an assassin in this game, one of the first ones, but you don't feel like one in the slightest. This game is one of the games that shows off the current Ubisoft formula originating from Ghost Recon Wildlands, which we'll talk about later, at its finest. It is Bayek, who I barely remembered his name, is a weak protagonist, and I just didn't connect to any of the characters or the world at all. You just aren't an assassin anymore. The stealth part of the game is just completely stripped away. You can just run around and use a two-handed weapon for some reason. It feels a lot more like an open world RPG, which seems to be where Ubisoft is taking the franchise. And now we arrive at modern day. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is now not about assassins in the slightest. It's a great Viking game, just not an assassin one. If you are looking for an Assassin's Creed game, then I would consider giving this a miss. You no longer can assassinate, and instead you pillage and conquest as a Viking. The ability to one hit kill, assassinate your targets is based on your stealth stat, which, unless you put a lot of points into, you aren't going to be able to successfully kill people. So there's no contracts, nothing like that. It's just kill people with a sword like every other open world RPG out there, which is quite disappointing in my opinion. However, if this was any other IP, I would have given this a pass and probably would have said it's a good game. So, Ubisoft, this is a decent game. It's just not Assassin's Creed. It just feels like they've taken the name Assassin's Creed and have gone, well, people like that. So if we keep selling them that, no matter what we do, it's gonna be well received. And I'm here to say it's not. It's not the franchise that people know and love. And I think this franchise reveals the full extent of how Ubisoft has changed, and is a story that is repeated time and time and again with each franchise they choose to change and strip from its core components. Something that once was unique and special has become something that is now generic and trend followy. And that's real hurts to see. Um, it's a violation of the core fan base, and they have nothing to say. They have nothing to go to. They're focusing on making a profit, and the market value that each franchise name has is how they make it. So of course they're going to keep going because, like any other behemoth, they need money, and that's quite sad. So now we're going to look at another one of Ubisoft's franchises and see if it can reveal more of where this company's gone wrong. Okay, so the smallest franchise on this list is Watchdogs, a unique franchise, completely different than anything else Ubisoft has put out, and is based around hacking your way around the map, helping grow your ability and stop bad guys. I'll analyze all three games in this series as I think they offer an interesting perspective on Ubisoft and is something that is quite manageable to do instead of the long list that both Assassin's Creed and Far Cry have to their name. So let's start with Watchdogs. Interesting, a fun hacking game, an interesting open world where each NPC has a backstory and a good story. Ubisoft, look at you go. It's a breath of fresh air that, as you play as admittedly kind of boring Aiden Pierce, but still offers an engaging and, most importantly, innovative open world experience. Something different, something that we haven't seen before. This was something that I personally could get behind. I enjoyed playing it the first time I went through it, and sure, the hacking isn't the best, but I will give it to Ubisoft. This was a good one. And then they released Watchdogs 2. Okay, another interesting hacker game set in San Francisco this time, except with a much more likable protagonist with Marcus and better hacking. This improves upon every single aspect of Watch Dogs 1 and is a great example of what a sequel should be. I really liked this game. Sure, the villains were weak and their motivations were a bit low, but I'll be honest, I spent quite a few hours in here. And also, the open world is great. Again, giving each character a backstory makes it kind of sad to go on a rampage because you look at them and they have their own little stories going on. And I think that's a feature that really lends itself and is quite unique. I can't think of many other games that give their NPCs this much personality. So overall, I'd say another win for you, Ubisoft. Look at you. I'm proud of you. And for fuck's sake. Watch Dogs Legion. They had to go and release this game. Sure, the Be Everyone mechanic is cool and feels like it belongs in the Watch Dogs franchise out of all of them. But when you don't have a likable protagonist like Marcus, and you're pretty much following the same gameplay as the other two games, it's hard to sell. And stay engaged in what is usually around a 30-hour long game. I got bored of the world after a few hours and couldn't get through it. The London was just not the same. Sure, you had the AI, but you didn't have the reason to keep playing. You didn't have it. Just whilst it was fun for a few hours to play as a granny, it just didn't make for a good story, in my opinion. Also, what's with the pointless microtransactions, Ubisoft? Like, why include them? You had to hunt them down to get them. They're quite expensive to buy, and all they get is cosmetics. They feel like a needless tack on when you could just focus on releasing some good DLC, and I just didn't understand why you didn't include it. Why you did include it, sorry. And overall, I just felt this one flopped and was a bit of a disappointment. So, all I can say is, when I played this game, I just missed Wrench, man. I fucking love Wrench. This franchise is one that felt like a safe ride for Ubisoft, and whilst I am glad they took the opportunity to innovate in Legion, it just fell flat in my opinion. However, I think they haven't lost my faith in this series. Out of all the franchises they have, I feel like Watch Dogs still has a chance. It just depends on what the next game brings. If they don't release something that has a good story, return to form in the world, and a better protagonist, then I'm still on board. You've got this, Ubisoft. Okay, now on to the final franchise that I'm going to be looking at for Ubisoft and hoping that they can sort of finish this story that we're putting together. And that is the Tom Clancy series. From Rainbow Six to Ghost Recon, it's your classic FPS espionage series. And we're going to start by analysing my personal favourite, Rainbow Six Siege. And it's a positive. A fun and interesting multiplayer game that is truly something different compared to all of the rest. Operators feel unique and require unique styles of play, which means that every game could be different depending on which operators you play and who you have on your team, meaning different tactics should be deployed to get the upper hand on your enemy. It's fun, engaging, and I've spent absolutely hours shooting it out in this game with friends, alone, and although sometimes the fan base can be a bit toxic, sorry, credit where credit is fucking due, Ubisoft. You released a really good multiplayer game here, and one that I think you could keep innovating and keep introducing new operators to, and it'd still stay fresh and fun. Maybe a few more modes, but I think you've got this. And now, on this high note, we're going to go on to The Division 1 and 2. And that's it for the positives. The Division games make my skin crawl. Not everyone hates them as much as I do, but I really do just that. Hate them. Why is there so much grinding in this game? I really cannot comprehend what Ubisoft was thinking with these games. Why is there beanies as loot for boss fights? Speaking of, why can every human tank about 15 magazines worth of bullets? It doesn't make sense. For a game that's supposed to be based on realism, why are humans, like, stronger than tanks? I don't understand. And I just can't. And guess what reared its ugly head again? The formula. The map is boring and littered with bullet sponges, and that's it. That's all that litters the map. There's nothing else to do other than walk from point A to point B and hope that you run into a few enemies to kill along the way. And this is for both games. There's nothing innovative here at all. It's just your standard shoot and loot, and it's a bad one at that. This is a dark path. So, Ubisoft, I am begging you, before you release the next Tom Clancy game, take your time, change it, make something special about it, and for fuck's sake, Ghost Recon Wildlands released. This game is the definition of Ubisoft as a company. If you wanted me to name a game that summarized this video perfectly, this is the one I would go to. A beloved franchise that has no innovation from any FPS. About 50 weak villains with lackluster boss fights, a lifeless open world, huge in-game purchases that apparently cover everything in the game, from XP boosts to literal character upgrades, so much grinding if you don't want to splash your cash, and a really, really, really boring story. This new Ubisoft formula, ladies and gentlemen, is awful, and it has seeped into every franchise since, because this was the game that was the turning point for me in the Ubisoft journey. I played this and was like, wow, that was shit. Hopefully the next games will be good. Nope. Every game from this, if you pay attention, has had some aspect of it inside, be it the microtransactions, the bad story, the multiple villains, the excessive grinding and level caps. Why, Ubisoft? Why are you doing this to me? What a travesty is all I can say for this. It's just, they're looking for profitability and they are destroying great franchises because of it. It really hurts to see. I'll be honest. Tom Clancy is such a well-known name that it will always sell, and Ubisoft knows that. However, I believe that this franchise has now become the epitome of what is wrong with Ubisoft and what needs to change for this company to get out of the rut it is in. This franchise should be allowed to rest and should no longer be dragged through the mud and destroyed any further, because it will never be able to survive. Ubisoft, you need to listen. Okay, so they're the franchises I'm going to go over in this video, and it's given me a lot to think about. Personally, I don't think Ubisoft is too far gone as a company. I think if they change the path they're going on to, then they stand a chance of becoming one of the greats again. But at the current time, they are just destroying beloved franchises with awful games like Far Cry 6, or they're stripping away everything that makes a franchise special, like Assassin's Creed. And it's really sad to see. They need to release some new IPs that allow them to tell exciting new stories in the way that they want to. If they want to have a great Viking game, great, make a great Viking game. Just don't sell it as Assassin's Creed. Let it stand on its own two legs without the need to rely on a name. And then we can still honor the franchises of old with great new Assassin's Creed games where you feel like an assassin, or the Far Cry games where you feel like you can just destroy everything because you're a bloodthirsty maniac, because that's what Far Cry is. And I love it for that. And even when it comes to multiplayer games, make them feel fun. You've already started introducing new multiplayer features into your single player games that you can take over and put them into your multiplayer ones. An open world multiplayer game would be great from you, Ubisoft, if done right. I really believe you are talented enough to do that. I truly hope Ubisoft listens to not just me, but all their fans who are telling them that they're fucking up, and take their time with the new Star Wars game, because if they don't, they will feel the wrath of all Star Wars fans, and trust me when I say, they are scary. I also just want to say, for the record, that I don't hate Ubisoft, and think they're very talented developers. they just make bad decisions sometimes. So with that is my analysis of Ubisoft and where they need to go, what they need to do, how they've been going for the past few years, and that's just my view on it. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Put them down below in the comments, and if you agree, give this a like and share it to some friends. It all helps. It all helps massively. And I really hope you enjoyed the video. This is a slightly different style to what the first Echoverse Unlimited show was, and I hope you liked it. I'm going to be looking over the next few days to see how people react to it, and then deciding what to do next week. And that will again be released on Wednesday, either on the stream or on social media, and probably both, if I don't forget. But yeah, I really enjoyed making this, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. So, without further ado, it has been a pleasure doing this video for you, and I will see you on the next stream. Enjoy your start to the week, and stay noisy. Goodbye!